Welcome, guys, to the second episode in the series, The Realities Associated with Becoming a GRC Analyst or GRC Specialist. And last week, I mean, I, along with my Pradeep and myself, we looked at a brief overview of GRC and a number of associated elements as it relates to eGRC and the various platforms that are also used to manage GRC efforts and initiatives within an organization. And we also gave you a high level view of what is entailed in the overall series. So, pretty much last week, we looked at um, elements of the GRC process just to give you an idea as to some of the things that are involved in the GRC space. And for sure, the main purpose of actually doing this GRC series, as the name suggests, we are going to be building our practical experience over the next coming weeks based on a job description. So we are not going to be trying to uh, maybe make things fictitious, but rather we are actually going to be looking at actual job descriptions. In this case, we're going to be focusing on the role of a GRC specialist or a GRC analyst based on what a particular organization required. And when you do that comparison between a number of GRC roles, then you're going to be finding those similarities that exist. So the main aim of doing this is for you to, at the end of the overall series, to gain some amount of practical experience that you can actually use or become familiar as it relates to the role of a GRC specialist as we go along. And for sure, there are many other resources, things that you can actually use. And that's the fun thing about the GRC space. There are so many resources that you can actually pull on to build your skill set. So this is more of a guided uh, series for you. So at least you're able to see all the various things that GRC specialists or organizations are normally looking for from GRC professionals to actually execute within their day-to-day job functions. And it goes beyond just using applications. There are many tools, software that are used to achieve the GRC functionality within organization, but those in of themselves are just tools. You as the GRC professional need to understand what it is that is being placed into these systems and how it is that the the, the machinery of our GRC within organization actually is the organization in its initiatives. So that's the main thing. So let's look at this. So today we seek to start breaking down that actual GRC role job description. Last week we just gave a sneak peek into what will follow, but this week we're going to be looking at the job role itself, and we're going to be taking this apart line by line, step by step, to build your portfolio in terms of the necessary practical things that you need to be aware of. So let me just bring this quickly on screen for you to let me. All right, guys. So what you're seeing on screen as we speak is the actual job role of a IT GRC. That's an IT governance, risk, and compliance specialist. Right. So that's the main responsibility that is required based on this organization. And organizations varies, but as I've mentioned before, these roles are similar in most organizations when you talk about carrying out those GRC functionalities within these organizations. So the IT governance risk specialist is, in this case, this person is required to for ensuring that this particular company regulatory requirements and effectively manage risk within the organization. So let's look at the job responsibilities. Um, Let me just quickly magnify All right. So we should be able to better see what's on screen. And the role that we're looking at is the very first job responsibility is to develop and implement IT governance policies and procedures in accordance with the ISO 27001, PCI DSS, EU GDPR, and other best practices. And as I've mentioned in the previous, in our previous episode within the series, this task in of itself requires fundamental understanding of developing, that's one, implementing uh, the IT governance policies and procedures. And these, of course, as it relates to the governance, we're talking about the nature, the structure of these policies in relation to meeting the requirements of these standards that are outlined here. So, the main, in this case, you're required to be familiar with creating policies, creating those standards, creating those procedures that are required by ISO 27001. And for sure, depending on the system that you're using, as I've mentioned, there are many GRC applications that are uh, have a number of pre-built templates, procedures, pre-built policies, and you name it. But using this system in of themselves without really understand what it is that you're doing in terms of what is involved in actually creating a policy, what it is that you need to be thinking of within an organization. Let's say you were tasked with actually work by yourself, maybe within a small organization, to develop their policies, procedures in accordance with ISO 27001 or PCI DSS or GDPR. What would be your approach? And the assumption is that at this point you would have some amount of understanding of what ISO 27001 is all about, what PCI, what GDPR, before you actually apply for this particular role. But let's say that you are new to GRC space and you still want that experience, then you can still follow along to build the experience. But this is not the time that your awareness to what is actually involved in the role of a GRC specialist actually, um, you can actually take your skill set to that next level in actually building out your experience and also your job, your resume. So at this point, I'm just going to be handing over to Pradeep. Pradeep will definitely be taking us to giving us an understanding of the ISO 27001, and for sure just giving us an overview. There are so many elements, there are so many depth to the ISO 27001 in terms of understanding the standards, the clauses that actually makes up the standard, controls the process of actually implementing these standards, planning for the implementation, the entire certification process is something that takes an entire course in of itself. So our aim is not to teach ISO 27001 or PCI DSS, but as the requirement suggests, in this case, our main focus is to develop and implement IT governance policies and procedures, and we're going to be looking for the rest of this series. The rest of this session for today is to look at how it is that we actually develop and implement the IT governance policies and procedure, what is involved, what we need to be thinking about. But before we actually look into those activities, then Pradeep will be taking us through ISO 27001 in terms of providing that overall understanding of what is entailed in this. So, so over to you, Pradeep.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody, whichever time zone you are in. As Rich mentioned, this is a series of discussion and sessions we will be conducting over a couple of sessions. Before I actually go to the PowerPoint presentation, I just got a very interesting post in the LinkedIn. Just wanted to share. and see if uh,
Okay, you want me? Oh, let me just bring this on screen. You want me to bring this on screen for you?
sorry, what happened?
You want me to bring this on screen for you?
Yes.
Okay, let me just bring this on screen. And let me remove this from screen.
Okay. So risk assessment by Tom. You see, um, I will just replay it once. So you see what happened exactly. Tom assessed the risk and he is safe. Now, what happens to the organization who don't update the risks?
Pradeep, can you repeat that for us? I think we're losing you. I think
Okay.
the background, I think your background that you're using might be interfering with your bandwidth.
Okay, I'll explain it later. But just wanted to show this short video to everybody who joined us. This was something interesting I found with respect to the risk and assessment, which we are going to talk ISO 27001 PPT. Uh, Missed meeting. Meeting in.
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Okay. Just give me a second. Something happened to my. I think I have to join it again. I stopped the presentation and I don't see
Oh,
how to
possibly
put it again.
you might have it in a different window. If you look
Mm,
at the top.
no, it's not there. I can see where it is, but it's not showing me loaded. Let me refresh it and see if it comes back. Probably I'll have to rejoin it. Just give me a second, Rich. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay, great. So, guys, so until we have the technical difficulty sorted out, as I was mentioned earlier, then this is what we're going to be embarking on within our series itself. And let me just quickly just give you an idea of all the different elements that we'll be focusing on. So, within this particular role itself, if we are looking on screen, the requirements of this particular job role, right? And this is a very good way, guys, to build your GRC skill, right? To look at job descriptions. That's one. Secondly, you want to reach out to persons who are actually within the GRC space, and you want to build good relationships. That's two very important things that I suggest within the GRC space. Let me see what's happening. Okay, guys. So sorry about those technical challenges that we're having. So, as I was saying earlier, then these are the job responsibilities that you, as the GRC specialist based on this organization, is actually requesting of you, right, to develop and implement IT governance policies. Let me see. I think Pradeep is back. Okay, let me see.
Hello.
Yes, Pradeep.
Yeah. Thanks for admitting again. Something happened to my screen, and I was
Yeah, I
um,
think I think what happens is whenever you're running a virtual background, you might end up having that problem.
got it. Okay, that's the lesson learned.
So possibly it
Uh,
might interfere with break. So what I could do is actually share the PowerPoint presentation from my side,
okay,
and then you could actually just take it from there accordingly. Let
that works too.
me quickly open this file. Okay, so okay, great. So you can actually take it from there, and I will just move accordingly. So you can go ahead.
Okay, just give me a second. Uh, if you could do the full presentation, that will be more good.
I don't understand. You want me to scroll through this document?
No, the full presentation. Um, okay, that's fine. I think it's not showing here. The full presentation, the full screen is not visible, but that's fine. Let's go over this. If you could go to the second slide.
Let me see if I can maximize. Let me see if I can maximize the screens.
Now there should be
The-
some option to the present to present.
Oh, from the PowerPoint, from the
Yeah,
um, no, it's actually in the PDF format, not the PowerPoint document itself.
PDF also we can present, but
Oh,
if you don't find it, that's fine.
oh yes. Uh, I'm not seeing the option right now. Let me quickly.
View and then there is a
There's an option for presentation. Uh, I guess you could always go ahead and then
yeah.
I
That's
can.
that's fine. Yeah, that we should cover it. So so hello everybody. My name is Pradeep. As we discussed over first meeting, first session over the EGRC requirements and technical skill set required for that. Today we are going to discuss about the ISO 27001. This is the awareness session. We will discuss one scenario which is related to the EGRC, e-commerce website, where we discuss what is the requirement for ISO 27001 in the e-commerce business and how to achieve that and what could be the benefit. So first, before going moving on to the case itself, we will discuss what is ISO and how what are the components of those. So if you could move down to the second slide, which
Okay, great.
yeah. So actually, I'll have to open my presentation too because the screen is little bit um, small. So let's understand what exactly is happening here. Um, what are the assets to an organization? What are the vulnerabilities, risks, and so on. So, for example, um, uh, there can be multiple types of assets: tangible, intangible. Uh, we are talking about the intangible assets, which are, you know, patents you have, softwares you have, um, artificial intelligence, blockchains, goodwills, any kind of data, any kind of anything related to internet. Uh, that could be our asset. Anything that you think it will be uh, the loss, or it's important to you, is the asset basically. Doesn't matter it's monetary or uh, any kind of asset. um, and then uh, we are talking about the company which is e-commerce website, uh, which generates revenue through online sales and store, right, and that has the customer data. So we are talking about uh, the data they have. uh, they can have the vulnerability, like outdated software. Maybe their website was developed a year back or a couple of years back. After that, there were a lot of changes happened to the um, technologies and security standards. So the e-commerce website is running on outdated versions of softwares, including the content management system plugins, server softwares. Okay, so these could have the security vulnerabilities, known security vulnerabilities. Those were not resolved, and that could be exploited by the attackers or the hackers. If you could move down to this PPT, third slide. So the threat, the malicious hackers, external hackers with the malicious intent, right? Actively searching for the vulnerabilities in the websites, and attempt to exploit for financial gain, or maybe just to harm you, right? In this case, the website is e-commerce. Maybe they just want to shut down your business. Maybe they are your competitor. Maybe they're just doing for fun sometimes. So they may exploit the outdated software to gain unauthorized access, to steal your customer data, and or maybe just disrupt the functionality, a certain part of the website, where maybe you are not able to do the payment, you are not able to do search or whatever. When it comes to risk, the risk is the potential for a threat, right? um, so threat exploiting a vulnerability and causing harm to the assets. So that is the risk in this example. The risk could include financial loss, right? Or maybe if a hacker successfully exploits the vulnerability of outdated software, they could gain unauthorized access to the company's website. This could lead to theft of customer data, maybe the credit card information, and this will be loss, financial loss to both of them, the company and their customers. And this will they will lose the trust, right? So it could also results in reputational damage or the loss of customer trust, the one I discussed. Could you move down to the PPT 2, sorry, 4? So Here we are talking about how to mitigate the risk um, the company have, right? Regularly updating the patch, right? Regularly updating the software. You may, if you are using laptops, you may have seen uh, uh, the auto pop up to restart your laptop over maybe over the period. Again and again you will see those regular patches coming from the Windows or the company or the laptop providers. This is to ensure you apply, you are safe and secure from the vulnerabilities and the risks. Right? Keep the e-commerce website server software up to date um, with the latest security patches and the versions. Right? Those addresses the known vulnerabilities or the known risks. Um, Implementing strong security awareness, security measures. Utilize robust security measures such as firewalls. You will have to place firewalls. You see here. We will talk in the next slides about the firewalls. Um, and you could encrypt your data. You could have the antivirus installed. Regularly perform security audits, right? Penetration testing you will have to perform, conduct regularly vulnerability or assessment testing. This helps to identify and fix potential vulnerabilities before they are exploited, right? By proactively addressing vulnerabilities, monitoring for threats, and implementing appropriate risk mitigation measures. So how do we do all these together? How, what measures to be taken care? What are the known vulnerabilities? To So ISO is the International Organization for Standardization. Could you move down to the fifth slide? Yeah. So ISO is the International Organization for Standardization. Basically, they standardize um, the processes. They are independent, non-government organization. They develop and publish the international standards. They develop the processes. These standards cover various industries and sectors, right? The example we had about the e-commerce website, that was the one domain. Similarly they have for all the domains. um, and then um, uh, if you see right side, there are a couple of industry uh, uh, there are few examples of these standards, right? You see here ISO standards covers various areas. You see 2700 um, 0 and then 1 2 3 4 5. These are just few of them. We have couple of more also. ISO standards covers various areas including quality management, environmental management, information security, occupational health and safety, energy management. Um, they provide organizations with internationally recognized framework, right, and guidelines to meet the industry best practices and enhance the performance of specific domain. To obtain the certification 27001 certification for any e-commerce website we are talking about here, we took the example of e-commerce website. um, you would need to follow certain systematic processes, right? And yeah, so first of all, we need to understand what are ISO 2700 standards with respect to the organization, particular organization or particular business. Familiarize yourself with ISO standards and its requirement. What are the requirements? Understand principles, controls, and objectives outlined in the standards. So, and see if your organization qualifies for that. If it doesn't qualify, you'll have to work on those. Establish the scope. So determine the scope of the Internet Information Security Management System (ISMS) for your e-commerce website. Identify the system, networks, processes, data, assets that will be covered by the certification, and then conduct a risk assessment, right? And then implement security controls, implement appropriate security controls to mitigate those identified risks, encryption, maybe access controls, maybe secure coding practices, maybe secure payment gateways, firewalls, right? Um, and intrusion detection systems, incident response procedures, right? Align your security controls with the ISO standards, um, ISO standards controls. Develop policies and procedures. Develop information security policies, procedures, and guidelines tailored to your e-commerce website. These should address areas like data protection, right? Secure transactions, customer privacy, um, and and the organization need to think through what are all areas need to be needed for to develop the policies and procedures. And then basically this requires uh, training the employees and the stakeholders, right? And this conducts internal audits also. You need to conduct the audits. We have to perform regular audits to assess the effectiveness of the um, implemented security controls. Maybe you have some controls, but you need to perform the um, audits time to time, identify any weaknesses and areas of improvement where uh, we need to take the corrective actions. And then we need to certification validity engage the certification body. So we are talking about these questions listed here. What is ISO standards? How, why it is important? How to get the certified? How it impacts to us? Um, and then once we engage the bodies, there are many external bodies who does the certification, ISO certification for your company. You can hire them, you can hire the consultants, you can hire individual bodies. Some of them are DNV, GL, uh, and then SGS. SGS is a trusted certification body that offers ISO 27001 certification services, right? They have a wide range of industry expertise, including e-commerce, and can assist organizations in achieving the certification. NQA, in, Intertech, uh, these are some of the external bodies who does the certification. And then um, certification decisions. Once the external bodies, they will review, document, and conduct on-site visits. They will have their experts deployed to the on-site, and then they will basically evaluate the implementation of the security controls specific to the organization. Here we are talking about e-commerce business. They will assess your company's compliance with the standard, and then finally they make the decision. Based on their assessment, the certification body will make a decision regarding ISO 2700 certification, 27001 certification for your business. If all requirements are met, they will issue the certificate. Otherwise, they will ask you to improve certain areas. um, and it's not only uh, getting the certification, right? uh, the companies need to maintain the certification over and over, so they need to follow the same procedures. They have to conduct the internal audits, train your resources, um, maintain compliance with the standard throughout ongoing monitoring, periodic internal audits, surveillance, conducted by the certification body and address any emerging risk or changes to the organization, right? So it is important to note that the certification process can vary, right, depending on the domain, business, um, and the certification area we have. So all right, if you could move down to next slide. um, Yeah. So ISO 2700 basically provides 114 controls. Um, those are spread across 14 domains. They have uh, like they have specific name also, like you see right side A1 A.5, which is related to the information security policy, and then there they have two controls. And if you go to A.6, that is related to the organization of information security. Uh, First one is related to the policy, information policy, and then um, second, third, fourth, you see, and then right side you have number of controls. So you see here 14 domains they have. uh, Across 14 domains we have 114 controls spread it across. If you can move down to next slide. um, Here like we discussed why we should do the certification, what is the process of doing certification. We discussed risks, we discussed the vulnerabilities, we discussed the importance of um, doing the regular audits, patches, um, being compliant to the processes and policies. Now what why should one organization do all these? Why do they need to invest this lot of money in this? For example, think about if the attackers or the hackers got the information related to uh, the customer data, which is the credit card information, you will lose entire business. This will cost you more. So it lowers the cost of risk. um, it controls the IT risk. It systematic detection of the vulnerability. So um, if you perform internal audits and it's being validated by the external authority like certification body or the consultants who are expertise in this area, they will probably they will provide you the guidelines, or they will be able to identify the any risk which you may not be seeing in regular business, which may hamper in future. And then fulfillment of internationally recognized requirements. So once you have such kind of certification, it increases the trust between the stakeholders, your business partners, your customers, and it helps to increase the business too. And then um, you know increase the trust with respect to partners, customers, and structured method to address the compliance requirement. Probably maybe government will have some certain policies or the requirements to be compliant with. So if you perform these audits and if you certify with ISO 27001, you'll have a lot of other benefits, including those are listed here. um, yeah, so this is what I had for today, Rich. um, Over to you.
Okay, great. Okay, great, Pradeep. So far, guys, what Pradeep has actually done so far is to give you an idea when you are a GRC professional. Let us quickly go right back to the actual job responsibility, right? So Pradeep gave you that practical alignment with the ISO 27001 standard based on the job role and responsibility. And in many cases, the overall purpose of ISO 27001 is to manage risk as it relates to the information that you have within your organization, right? So it's a risk management standard pretty much put in place to deal with the risk associated with your information within the organization. And they have pretty much aligned that with a case whereby this company has a maybe an e-commerce based um, operations where possibly this information system could actually be hosted on premise or in the cloud. But wanting to have that credibility, then this organization seek to um, go for the ISO 27001 certification to allow them to operate at a more credible level within the overall um, space internationally. So it's very important that as a GRC professional, then you take that time, the initiative, to understand thoroughly the standard that you're working with. Right? That's very, very important. You have to, in most cases, you're going to be working alongside possibly other experts in the industry, persons within these various departments. Then you have to show that level of expertise, that level of competence in terms of the questions that you ask, the comments that you make, the level of reasoning, and the way you communicate on a whole as it relates to these standard procedures within the organization. So taking a step to go beyond the surface to understand. So in this case, you want to, before you can actually develop these policies, standard procedures, then it simply means that you have to have that thorough understanding of what this ISO 27001 is all about in this case, or PCI is all about, or the requirements of GDPR. So that's very fundamental. So that in of itself takes a lot of research on your part, understanding the requirements of the standards so that you're able to within the organization develop these standards, these procedures that enable this organization to achieve the overall objective as it relates to the requirements of this particular standard that they are trying to um, achieve within the organization itself. So very important, let us quickly look at the process involved in developing and implementing these policies and procedures. So you have to have that understanding what goes on into um, structuring these policies and procedures, or it is that you need to be thinking as a GRC professional within an organization. And the reason why I try to emphasize this is the fact that you have many templates that you can simply pull down from the internet in repositories, and you can actually use those templates, procedures that are used by many other organizations. But the thing about doing this that you could actually find yourself in a lot of issues. And the reason why I say that is that the policies or procedures that you pull from the internet might not be in line with addressing the risks that have been identified. And these policies and procedures, secondly, could possibly might not be in line with how it is that you actually implement these control measures effectively as required. So each organization is different, each business is different, they have different business objectives that they are trying to achieve on an overall basis. So these policies and procedures must be in line with meeting these business objectives as and also be so designed that they are effective. They are in line with the implementations of these controls that are required within the organization. So that's very important. So let us quickly look at Pradeep earlier outline a number of, and I just wanted just to quickly give an idea of let me for persons who, so in this case, for example, right? So if you're going to be working with, for example, the ISO 27001 um, implementation in terms of policies, procedures, then it's very important that you understand all the necessary fundamentals, the documentation surrounding these policies, right? For example, all of this might seem like to be confusing, um, and this is how it is. It's all about learning, building your experience, right? And I've actually done a video presentation that speaks to, if you go onto the Cyber JA YouTube channel, which I strongly suggest, then you can actually find the details and also access the resources to this particular um, um, all the resources contained here that I'm actually showing. So getting familiar with ISO 27001, as was mentioned earlier by Pradeep, is very important. So all of these, then developing all of the documentation, the policies, everything must be done in line with the business context, right? So I will not be spending a lot of time in going into all of that. So let us now turn our attention to looking at what is involved in actually developing these policies and these required procedures accordingly, and what it is that you need to be thinking about as it relates to these policies and procedures to meet the objectives. So we are now at job role responsibilities number 1. And in the next week, then we are going to be going on to 2, followed by 3, etc. So we're going to be developing a comprehensive understanding, guys, right? You would have built, you would have completed at least 13 different levels of skill set that you can actually say, yes, I understand what it is to conduct a business impact analysis, all of these things to actually apply for a GRC role. So let's go back to job role number 1. All right. So with that said, let us let me quickly. All right. So these are the standards, ISO 27001 policies. All right. So these are the policies that Pradeep um, alluded to earlier within his presentations. Right. And the policies varies depending on the number of risks that you're trying to mitigate within an organization. Right. So these are a number of the more familiar policies, right? Your scope, your risk, your access, your acceptable. All of these are policies that he mentioned earlier, along with associated clauses. So each of these clauses will provide you all the details of what is required within the clauses. And if you take it to ISO 27002, then that actually tells you how it is that you can actually apply these controls, etc. Right? That is just additional information. Um, Now, let us quickly go to looking at. Let me quickly uh, all right, guys. Let me quickly just clear my screen. Okay. So when it comes on to developing your policies or your procedures, let me quickly add this to your screen. Where is this? Just give me a second, guys. Okay, great. So when you are actually developing your policies and procedures, then there are a number of things that, let me quickly see what's happening. I am not able to. So give me a second, guys, quickly. All right, guys, let me. Sorry about that. Technical difficulty. Just give me a second. Okay, great. So the first thing, as I've mentioned before, is that you need to become familiar with the standards, which Pradeep earlier highlighted. So becoming very familiar with the standards is very important in terms of developing the necessary policies and procedures. And you have many policies and standards. You have our policies rather. You have information security policies, risk assessment and treatment policy, access control policy, and the list goes on. So, with that said, then the question is, what's the process involved for developing the policies and procedures required by the ISO 27001? That's the key thing, right? So the first thing is to, right, and what's going to be placed in these items here. All right, so guys, this is one of the very first that you want when it comes on to developing ISO 27001. You want to understand the context, and this is where you gain a clear understanding of the organization's context, including its objectives, processes, information assets, regulatory requirements, and risk landscape. And you also want to identify the stakeholders who should be involved in policy development, such as senior management, IT personnel, legal and compliance representatives, and the relevant business units. Right? Then, secondly, you want to uh, conduct your risk assessment, right? Right. So, conduct that risk assessment. This is where you perform a comprehensive risk assessment to identify and assess and the information security risks that could impact the organization assets and operations. Then you also want to evaluate the likelihood and impact of risk within the organization, right? Then you thirdly want to establish the uh, the policy framework, right? And this is where you actually start by developing a high-level information security policy that sets the tone and direction for the organization's commitment to the information security. Then you also want to have your policy development, right? So you conduct your risk, establish the framework, policy development, where you engage your relevant stakeholders, including your subject matter experts, to contribute to the policy development process. Then you want to review the existing policies and procedures to identify gaps or areas that need improvement. Right? The next thing is to move on to things such as your policy review and approval, the procedure development, the implementation and communication, monitoring and review. And it's also important to note that policy development is an iterative process. So you definitely will have regular feedback, updates, that continuous improvement are very essential to ensure that the policies and procedures remain relevant and effective in the organization's information security needs. Right? So you always, when it comes on to developing policies, you have to think about the context of the organization, the business outcomes of the organization that you are looking at as it relates to all of these policies, right, within the organization. So let's just quickly look at developing an actual policy within the organization. So let's take for example, right? So let me just quickly remove all that is here. right? And guys, bear in mind that this is not something that actually you might not understand. All that is we are talking about, you might not be as efficient in terms of developing these policies, writing these procedures. But the key thing is to understand what it is that you're working with. If you're working with PCI, take that time to understand all the PCI requirements, and there are many resources that exist about all of these standards, all of these compliance regulations. So that's the key thing about the GRC space. You can always research to gain all of this insight. So let's say we want to develop a access control policy, right? Then the first thing in this case, for example, access control policy, then you want to have your policy statement, right? That's your policy statement. So you have your access control policy followed by your policy statement. And a policy statement could be something like this. Right? This is just for an example. Right? This is just for an example. And in this case, it says that our organization recognizes the critical importance of maintaining effective access controls to protect our information assets. This policy establishes guidelines and procedures to ensure that access to information systems and assets is granted only to authorized individuals and based on the principles of least privilege. Right? So you have to think about the policy. In this case is an access control policy. Then you would have done this in light of the controls that are being implemented based on your risk assessment, based on the risk appetite of the organization, what it is that they are trying to achieve from a business perspective within the organization. So all of your policies, procedures must be in line with. None of these policies or procedures must be an hindrance to the overall business processes, right? So having established your access control policy statement, then you look at your scope, right? So let me quickly just remove these items. Then you think about your scope, right? The scope of the policy, right? And this policy applies to all employees, contractors, and third-party users who have access to our information systems and assets. It covers both physical and logical controls. So in this case, then you have to definitely be specific as to who it is, what departments, what entities within the organization this policy will apply to. Then, once that is established, then you move on to creating the objectives of that particular policy, right? So your policy objectives to ensure that access to information systems and assets is properly authorized and authenticated. Secondly, prevent unauthorized access, modification, or disclosure of sensitive information. So you have your scope, you have your policy objectives, and you would have earlier established your policy statement. All right. Then, once that is achieved, then you then move on to, very importantly, is your access control procedures and guidelines. So you would have established what the policy scope, the policy is all about. Then the next thing is to look at the access control procedures and guidelines. Right. So the policy, right? So initially, the policy access control policy, right? So, and I am seeing an input from Patrick, good input, Patrick. He says that, so in other words, knowing the IAM process is very important in GRC policy controls. Yes, that's a very valid point there, right? So understanding the IAM process, identity and access management, is very important. So as Pradeep has also mentioned in our previous series and earlier on, that having that understanding of these technical things in terms of from a cybersecurity perspective, understanding how networks operate, understanding IAM functions, computer systems, IT controls, general controls. Having that understanding as a GRC professionals can definitely add value to the way you actually execute your duties as a GRC professionals. You need not um, have to have that deep technical understanding, but having that basic, those fundamental understanding of the principles of cybersecurity, networking, um, all of these elements are very important to building your skill set as a GRC professional so that you have that holistic approach in terms of what it is that you do. If you're auditing, if you're implementing, managing these GRC functionalities and roles, then it adds to your credibility and your value and within the organization. So you have your access control policies and procedures, right? So let us go back to developing these procedures based on the policies outlined earlier. So in this case, for example, then we could say, right? So for this access control procedures and guidelines, then we could say user access provisioning. So in creating user access, right? Then access rights will be granted based on job roles and responsibilities defined by the HR department. So from the get-go, then you recognize that you would have to sit with the organization. The policies that are established are not something that you of yourself can do in terms of making the final decisions, but you have to implement these, have to go through the necessary revisions for management based on the overall organizational structure, the GRC capabilities, the business outcomes have to decide on what is acceptable, what is not acceptable in terms of all of these policies and procedures that are developed. And secondly, they must be as simple as possible for the end users within the organizations to comply, to follow, to easily understand, not to have those policies, procedures that have a lot of technical jargons that create ambiguity within the organization. Right? So you have, for example, requests for user access will be submitted through a formal process approved by the appropriate manager or supervisor and documented. Right? So that's an example for or access control, and it can goes on further to even authentication mechanisms, access reviews and auditing, termination and changing access. So all of these policies and procedures actually come into play. Roles and responsibilities, right? So, and for sure, this is not comprehensive enough itself. The most important thing is to understand when you are developing policies, they must not be generic. Policies and procedures must be in line with the nature of the organization, the overall business scope, the objectives of that organization. And very important is the fact that these policies and procedures must enable the business function in light of the risks that have been identified. I mean, information security risk, cyber security risk, and at no point should be an hindrance to the overall operation of the organization. So let us quickly go back to our right. So there we have our job responsibilities. Just to bring back this to focus for you to understand where we are coming from. So we are looking at the scope of this job description is the IT GRC governance, risk and compliance specialist, and their job responsibilities: one, develop and implement IT governance policies and procedures in accordance with ISO 27001, PCI, GDPR, and other best practices. So in this case, we pretty much have given you that background into ISO 27001 based on what Pradeep have actually presented. That's something that you as the GRC professional need to be aware of. So many organizations use, for example, you have ISO 27000. You might go into a different organization, it might be using GDPR. You might go into a different organization, they are using some other framework for risk management or IT governance or some other cybersecurity framework, NIST, you name it. So gaining understanding the standards, that's the principle. That's the very important thing that you need to understand when it comes on to this. Then you sit with your organization and your team and you work along with each other in terms of developing these requisite policies and procedures. So, guys, so there we have it. In a nutshell, in terms of building your skill set. And we're going to be doing this line by line in terms of job responsibilities. So it's now for you to do further research in terms of putting down that standard, the ISO 27001, your PCI, your GDPR, understand what the requirements are, understand, look at various generic policies and procedures, and for sure, tailor, customize, tweak these to fit the organization in terms of their goals and business objectives. So, guys, there you have it in yet uh, our series looking at the practical realities of becoming a GRC specialist or analyst. So, see you in next week, part three of our series. We're going to be diving into job role number two and possibly additional responsibilities, guys. So, see you in next week episode.